camera. Got this recording too, just in case for a backup, but we are live. Victoria, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
So just to get things popping off, get everyone kind of know what we might get into here. You seem to be doing a lot of big things in this life, but it's kind of, you learn to overcome some trauma at an early age and some adversity. And that's kind of what maybe jump-started your success, would you say?
I think it's what's propelled me to drive so hard forward. Quite frankly, Chris, I was determined to be better than sort of the biology I was, born into, and then circumstance that I was raised in. And so that's what caused me to drive exceptionally hard from a career and life perspective.
So without that, you think that you would have found that drive on your own or no?
Well, I'm exceptionally type A personality, as your listeners will learn, I'm sure, through the course of this podcast. And so I feel like innately there's something in my DNA that would have, propelled me forward. And I sign a lot of my social media posts, hashtag no excuses and hashtag unstoppable. But I do think a lot like long before Simon Sinek was, saying start with why, and his TED Talk became so famous. For me, I spent a lot of time trying to understand my why and what drove me forward. And so I have no problem sharing. I'm a fairly open book. I'm born to a drug addicted teenage mother who was extremely abusive to me. I was removed from her care into a home that loved me, no further abuse, but socioeconomically lower circumstance in terms of my dad was a janitor, my mom a secretary. And I remember my mom said to me when I was probably 10 or 11 years old, she's like, "Tori, you just need to do better than us." And she didn't need to say that because, as I said earlier, I was determined to be better than biology or circumstance. And so that helped drive me forward. But again, I think innately there was something in me that, wanted to, like I had something to prove.
So you got a bad hand of cards coming out the gate, right? But and that's one of the cool things, because a lot of people who I follow based on, even their TED Talks, comedians, sports figures, movie stars, whatever, it seems like a lot of them have had to come from some type of trauma in the beginning. And that's kind of, like I said earlier, not really jumpstart their success, but learn to to give them that drive and that motivation and that, I don't know, that work ethic in order to become something better than what they found into. And I don't know if that's missing in the world today or what. I mean, I'm not saying that people are not born into bad types of life, but it seems to almost be able to point a finger at somebody to blame, like, you're the reason why I wasn't able to do X, Y, and Z. Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah, no, it does. And, for me, I spent a lot of time reflecting. I have two children who makes me feel old as I say this, but 22 and 18. And, my son is the older of the two of them. And was identified as being like exceptionally gifted, but he's also exceptionally lazy. And I remember he said to me, and I think I've pushed them to try and understand the value of hard work and a dollar, just because I've worked really hard to provide the lifestyle we have, to have them understand that, we're in the top 1%. And this came with really, really hard work. And my son said to me a number of years ago, he's like, "Mommy," kind of pointed around the house. He's like, "I don't need all of this. I'm fine with mediocrity." And so I won an award last year, and he's like, "Oh, I'm proud of you." But he's like, "Just so you know, like, I don't want to be you." And so that's where I sort of reflect. And is it the adversity that's driven me forward? The fact that my children didn't have that. And I see this very different kind of perspective. Now, innately, my daughter's is like, she wants to make money. She wants to drive. Like she's, so the two of them are very different. But I do actually wonder if that is when, you sort of start with why and understand why, as you said, you follow these people. And a lot of them say it was hardship, adversity, or challenge that's driven them forward. And I do attribute a lot of my drive to that, much like others, I believe.
Yeah. Well, growing up for me, I felt like if I was challenged for something, I was almost instantaneously started to back away from it, just because, it was either too hard, I would think, or I would have a little self-pity. It's like, oh, I can't do this. And why even bother? I guess it was maybe a little after college where if something started to become hard, that I wanted to start to face it head on, because I knew, like, kind of putting yourself out of your comfort zone, that how much you might not see the benefit right then, but down the road you would start to see it. And even I follow Dr. Peter Attia, in which he's always talking about, you have to challenge yourself each and every day, whether it be, like mentally or physically, and just like small things. I'm not saying go out there and run marathons and, try to pick up 500 pounds or anything, but just doing those all small things will actually lead to longevity. And you learn about yourself and learn that you can take on daily life. It makes daily life almost easier, just like winning those small challenges. And so, instead of backing away from those things, it was like on some meetings, like for me, it was like, let's go take this and see what happens with it, run with it. And if I fail, cool, no big deal. But what's worse that could happen, right? You either fail or I don't know. I guess fail. That's probably the worst thing that could happen.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. I mean, I spent a lot of time coaching, people who are early in their career who want to spend some time with an executive, sharing sort of some of my life lessons, if you will. And also when I speak on stages, and, one of the messages I have is that if you don't lean into your discomfort, the things that make you highly uncomfortable, like the growth will not come. Sure. And to your point, Chris, what's the worst thing? You're going to fail. Or when it comes to, I also said, spent a lot of time talking about like, getting, what you're worth. What are they going to do? Say no? Right? Like that. So, but I mean, there's fear of failure, fear of rejection. And so people just kind of need to overcome that hurdle to achieve whatever their goal or objective is.
Yeah. And, not only fear of rejection, but, nobody wants to look like an idiot or a fool when they try something new. And that's when part of it is like, you have to learn to adapt to that. And then like, okay, if you do look like a fool, or if you do get rejected the first time, and if you don't be able to succeed in some form, but then if you do it again, the same thing the second time, or even the third time, then it starts to become on yourself. And that's when, it's like, okay, maybe I need to take a step back and start to look at some other things and like figure out, how to get past this goal, whether it be, I don't know, easy or hard, and just that the fact that, like I said, you just grow as a person. And then like, if you get cut off in traffic and like, something really bad's happened to you, you're like, okay, cool. No big deal. I'll just keep moving on with my life. And I know worse things can happen and I'll be okay. So I don't know. Sometimes I just wonder, I'm in my mid 30s. And sometimes I wonder if younger generations are missing that point or that importance of life by easily just playing the victim mentality and just saying, oh, I didn't, pass. Like I used to work in higher education. Nobody got their work. If they didn't do their work, their essays or whatever you want to say. And it was just so easy to blame others for it. It's like, well, I don't think so, bro. I don't think it works like that.
Yeah, that's right. I agree.
So, but moving on though, I mean, with your leadership style and your public speaking, I mean, did you have big influences during your life that you were kind of looking up to and just saying, hey, I want to kind of follow their lead and like, I like what they're doing and let me take some pearls and gems from them and just model yourself after them?
Sadly, I didn't. In fact, I think, Chris, that I learned from people that I wanted to be nothing like, because they set really poor examples in business, whether that was their integrity and ethics to their leadership style. And so for me, I didn't have a mentor early on or great example. I think I always had just this idealistic view of what I wanted to be based upon the type of leader I would want to work for. And I made some mistakes early on. So I became a COO, Chief Operating Officer, at age 24. Now I graduated at 16, so I've been in the workforce for a bit. That was still young and it was still a stretch role. So a combination of being the youngest by 2 decades, the only woman literally at the boardroom table, I feel like I had a bit of imposter syndrome. And so and I think I was still fearing failure and rejection. So I showed up in a certain way. And that was like to be all business all the time with like a bit of this mask. And, I learned that my nickname had become the Iron Maiden. And it was because I perform, I've been through 18 mergers and acquisitions, and a lot of that comes with, reorganization and some synergies, as they call it, cost takeout, making really difficult decisions. And I would execute against those. And I think people saw no emotion from me, for example. I got very good at managing performance, but I never showed. I have a nickname, it's Turtle. I have a tattoo on my arm. And because, I can shoulder a lot, right? I have a very tough exterior, but I'm actually all marshmallow inside. But this mask I wore and I showed up every day, no one saw that. And so for me, And so this was a lesson. I wasn't the type of leader I would have wanted to follow into the fire. And so I had to start doing things very differently as well, in being more vulnerable. And, long before Brene Brown, I like to think I was ahead of the Simon Sinek's and Brene Brown and those types with some of the phrases anyways, and the way I operate. And so I had to do it differently. And so now I hope that I'm one of those leaders that people look in, and I'm the one that they look up to, and can be their mentor.
Yeah, I mean, it's just kind of like what we just said earlier, going into that board meeting, you being the only female in there. I mean, that's got to be, a little stressing and also very intimidating at the same time. And did you say you were pretty young at that age too?
24.
Yeah. So, I mean, was that just kind of, and that was one of your first things going out. So, yeah, going into that field and just knowing that, oh shit, is this how it's going to be? And then you overcoming that. I mean, that, builds that turtle shell that you just talked about right there, where other people could just easily tuck back in and go hide away from it. But that's pretty cool. Like, yeah, like we were talking about challenge and stuff. You just went in there and did your thing.
Yeah, it was a pretty big stretch role for me because I'd come from working in financial institutions and running operations, and then all of a sudden I'm in a business to business environment where almost all of the functional areas except for finance reported to me. So I mean, it was a stretch role, and I needed to lean into people in my team who knew more about the functional areas than I did. I'm not a fan of fake it till you make it. However, when it comes to confidence, that's one of those areas where, sadly, confidence is often interpreted for competence. And so I leaned heavily, into it, but I could also say, hey, I don't know what I don't know. And with that over time, then I gained the actual competence in those areas, and the confidence matched as well. But again, that's about leaning into the things that make you really discomfort. I don't think the growth is going to come otherwise.
Yeah. Confidence definitely builds confidence. And I've learned that along this little path or whatever I've been doing here lately. But, and also with the fake it till you make it thing too, I used to think that was like a cool quip. I think it's the right word that you say. But I think that eventually does catch up with you if you are, just winging a presentation or winging anything you do in life. Really, it's going to catch up with you. I mean, because eventually you'll get exposed, right? So yeah, I agree that I used to like that saying, but now it's kind of like, no, it doesn't. It's cool to say, and it's cool in the beginning, but eventually you'll be exposed, and then all of a sudden I think that'll lead you to a downward spiral, and then wish you would never did the things that you did. So, but yeah,
no, I agree. That's why I said for me, it's only that singular slice around faking it with a level of confidence, but not with around skills and competence at all. And even it's funny, a lot of people ask me to talk about public speaking, and I'm like, I said, you need to know your content cold. Like, you don't want to stand on also, I don't like to sound scripted and be reading from notes. So it should be a conversation you have with the audience, and therefore make sure it's something that you're intimately aware of. And yeah, you might refer to notes for some facts or figures to ensure you get it right. But so that for me, all around, I'd much rather, come from a place of like knowledge and understanding and experience, and then put my hand up to say when I don't know something, because I'd rather that than look completely foolish or arrogant on the opposite end. And if I don't know the content, but I've come across as though I did somehow.
Do you know who Jocko Willink is?
No.
He's a former Navy SEAL. He's big on writing books now and kind of using his military experiences and put them into the business world. And one of his things is one of his recent books is called Extreme Ownership, where he basically just says that, hey, you don't know what you don't know, and just admit it. It's no harm in just saying, and I think owning that responsibility and like learning from it from there. And, instead of just going with that fake it mentality that, and just, I don't know, acting like you can do something for the world, just say it, and it's no big deal. Like you almost get more respect basically out of saying that, and then saying, hey, let's sit down and talk about this, and if you teach me or whatever, and we'll figure it out. So yeah, and that's another thing. That's one of those things that a lot of people are scared to say, I don't know, right? Just because of, again, being looked down upon, or like they don't want to look vulnerable in that moment, I guess. So by saying that, then they look, they don't have that confidence anymore. So yeah, but that's one of the cool things I've learned is just that, hey man, it's no big deal. And I respect people who say that to me too, that it's just, I'd rather them just tell me that rather than try to rant off some facts, figures, statistics, and random stuff. You're like, what? This don't make zero sense, man.
That's
Yeah. So it's really cool. But, I guess moving forward though, I mean, when did you start with the public speaking though? I mean, was that just something that kind of came along your career path, or was it something, hey, I want to go tackle this on?
Well, so it's interesting, and I again leaning into the things that make you uncomfortable. Now, I was an actor when I was younger, and so I was comfortable standing in front of audiences, but I was always playing a part, someone else, not Victoria. And so when I had to start doing it for business purposes, I was uncomfortable because again, now it's Victoria standing on stage as Victoria, the leader who's supposed to have, expertise in whatever I was being asked to speak on. And so I was thrust into doing it from like a corporate industry perspective and speaking almost exclusively on the industry or the functional topic for that conference. And that's 20 plus years ago. I've been doing that, sharing my personal story and weaving that into career and life lessons. That's newer for me. And so that's maybe 10 years ago. And also when I shifted to becoming a paid public speaker as well, because at the end of the day, to be an engaging speaker and captivate your audience, you want to build connection with them. And so my ability to share my story, my why, when it comes to, I have multitude of topics, but there's one that I do often around career and life lessons. And I start with my why. And so that brings people in, but just to anecdotes as well to build that connection. And it's funny because I even coach, my sales and relationship or client managers within, the teams that I lead directly to say that, people do business with people they like and they trust and they want to do business with. And so I've taken what I've learned, on the stages that's become this evolution. I wasn't always the extrovert you see in front of you now. Again, I needed to do it over and over and over again. And then again, I shifted my storytelling to connect more deeply with audiences in a very different way. And that in itself, seeing their reaction and response brings me a lot of joy, which is why I'm happy we're back to in person and it's not all virtual now.
Yeah. What got you into acting?
So my mom put me into a modeling originally. So I'm adopted, and so they didn't know exactly how tall I was going to be, but I'm 5'8", and I hit this height by the time I was 11 years old. They thought I was going to be like 6 feet tall or more, and I was fairly shy. So my mom thought it would be a great way to put me in a situation to break me out of my shell a little bit. And the modeling, and I never grew taller, and 5'8" is the minimum to do runway work. And so I started shifting to do some print work, and then I got to do some commercials, and then I took acting while I was in high school, and I loved it. And so then I just kind of continued it for probably into my early 20s, and then when it conflicted with my corporate career and my ability to do that in the evenings part-time.
Yeah. So you did it for a pretty good while up into your 20s? Yeah. Well, I mean, what was it like? I mean, going through it that long in that process. I mean,
I I really, really enjoyed it. In fact, part of the reason I stopped was I also got relocated with work cross country. And so I had bought the casting agency. So I've long since been, although I'm a corporate executive for like Fortune 500 companies, I've also built and bought businesses. And so when I was 19, I think 18 or 19, the agency that was representing me, the two guys that owned it were relocating back to where they'd originally come from, and I bought it from them. And so that afforded me a few more opportunities to get placed, obviously. And but I just enjoyed it. I moved cross country, so I sold that business to a business partner, and thought I would get started all over again. But then life took me away from that, met my ex and got promoted further at work and had children shortly afterwards. And so I never did it again, but I did a lot of like commercials and some small TV work. But I actually, my favorite was on stages, probably why the public speaking still resonates a lot with me, because you feel the vibe in the room and the audience and how they respond and react to you.
Did you think when at that age that, that was your goal in life, was to become a big actress or a model? I mean, was that kind of what you were leaning towards, or you were just kind of going with the flow because
no, it paid well, but I think I bought my first house at 19 as well. So again, you hear my drive, and I was like, well, that's not going to pay my mortgage, and it can end at any time. And so it was always kind of a side hustle for me that, again, I enjoyed doing it. I could go and do commercial and make a couple $1,000s. That was like 25 or however many years ago that I was doing it. But I think I was always very pragmatic and recognized that as much as it would be cool, I was not going to be, a Hollywood star.
So you got I guess, a good realistic view on it at the same time. Yeah.
Exactly.
So yeah, but yeah, that's cool. Like buying your house at 19, though. Yeah, that had to be thrilling and kind of nerve wracking.
It was. And I have this relationship with money, which is really interesting because coming from nothing, and my parents, as I said, mom a secretary, dad a janitor, didn't have money, didn't go on vacations, couldn't go on my, senior year class trip because they didn't have money. I gave my parents my house. I got relocated across country when I was 20 and they had declared bankruptcy. And so they were able to assume the mortgage without qualifying. And sadly, they lost it 2 or 3 years later in a subsequent bankruptcy yet again. But for me, it's just, the money could be remade for sure. So, but then it's interesting too. I think I felt I had something to prove. So, into my, 20s, even up into my 30s, I felt I was trying to accumulate more and more to impress others, quite frankly, to impress others. And so my relationship with money and material possessions changed in my 30s, quite frankly. I've always continued to work hard for it, but I left my ex everything in our divorce because again, I felt it was the right thing to do. And so again, relationship with money has been really interesting. And at one point I remember flying my dad out and I had a live-in nanny at the time in a large home. And I actually felt almost embarrassed. Like, although I should have just hoped that he would be proud of all that I'd accomplished. I just remember feeling, I don't know if embarrass is the right way, but I'd achieved a level that my parents never did. And so I was worried about how he would view that. It's interesting.
Like they would envy you or be jealous?
Yeah, I don't know if it's jealousy. I mean, my mom, unfortunately, my mom passed away when I was pregnant with my daughter. So it was after that I actually had brought my dad out. And I felt it created a lot of discomfort recognizing where, he had come from and the lifestyle he led to then step into mine. And so I should have just, felt proud and hoped that they would feel the same for me. But I just had this incredible sense of discomfort about the whole thing.
So I don't know. So okay, let me get my thought together here. So I'm getting ready to start reading the book, The Psychology of Money, which I haven't started yet, but that's my next book I'm going to read. But I'm wondering, based on what you said and some things that I've seen in my lifetime, that when people do get to a certain level of success and they're able to, and not purchase like a Rolex just to make them say, oh, I'm successful now, I got a Rolex, or fancy cars or whatever. But when people are able to, I guess, afford nicer things or have a different type of lifestyle, that it's almost, in a sense, like survivor's guilt, I guess. Maybe that's not the right word I'm trying to say, but they don't want to initially show off that materialistic thing to others just because of what judgment they might receive, and that they know that, they might be looked down upon, or, and I guess where I get that from, I used to work at a produce warehouse and all these kind of blue collar jobs, growing up. And, if you drove in with a brand new car or whatever, people would instantly say like, oh, we know who's making all the money, or you can't hide money, can you? And like stupid little things like that. And I was like, quick, I mean, it's got a new truck. It ain't really a big deal at that, at that time. So I wonder if there's just something weird with the way the mind interprets money in today's society, or even back then society, and it's just like, these weird life lessons that you have to come across and to try to adapt to that situation. I hope that kind of made sense what I was trying to say. I was trying to
I think you're right. And it's funny because when I say this weird relationship for me with money at the time is I wanted the bigger and the bigger house and the vehicles and all of those things to show the rest of the world I'd made it.
Yeah.
Right. And so I aspired for that, and I wanted to sort of show my success and wealth. Yet with my dad, it was the one where I was like, again, it felt uncomfortable because it was a place, he hadn't come from. But then also it shifted all around to me. So my ex passed away from second bout of cancer, which we found out had come back a few months after we separated. That's actually, quite frankly, why I left my ex everything in the divorce, because I was younger. I was the primary earner. And I was like recognizing with the journey that was ahead for my ex to go through the process again. But that was also, it was that, and then my ex passed away from it. But that moment, it's so fleeting. My ex was 49 years old. And
Wow.
so, and I was 30 something. There was a 13-year age difference from us. But that also changed my relationship with money, because for me, life is so fleeting, and my children had lost a parent, that my my concern with proving to the rest of the world what I'd achieved with material possessions changed. Because I remember my mom joked around when I was young, and she's like, money doesn't buy happiness.
Sure.
Although she'd say, but it makes one hell of a down payment. But at the same time, I realized that. So it's funny, because I then started downsizing homes. When I met my now husband, I remember he came into this, to see me like in my home, and it was like myself and the two kids. And I'm like, for what level did I need that home? And so for then I've started to shed a lot of those things. Don't get me wrong. I still love my Louis Vuitton and my Christian Dior, a few things that I like, but otherwise I don't need a lot of that. It is about, the time we get with our family and friends and so many other things. Yeah.
Yeah. And, that's one of the misconceptions or narratives, whatever you want to say. Again, when I was working in higher education, my students, would always say, I want that Rolex, or I want to be driving a Bugatti or whatever it is. And that's, because then they know they've made it or whatever. But I did a podcast with Brent Cassidy, and, he actually, did this whole insurance thing, and he ended up going to jail. Long story short, got really wealthy and ended up going to jail. And that's kind of where he started to learn to realize that, it is about family and friends, and that, yeah, you had tons of money. And the way he explained it was, how Forrest Gump does, it's where it's, we don't have to worry about money anymore. It's just one less thing, which it didn't change, his relationships, or, how he lived his life, or, the people that meant the most to him. It was just him learning that while in prison and being isolated, that, hey, I got people on the outside that need me, and, that I want to be with. And it doesn't matter if you have $10 in your pocket or $1,000 in your pocket. Right. But, and I'm like you too. I like nice things too, for sure. But, and I'm not shitting on nice things by any means, but it's just, and also that my maturity level, I feel like, I've seen that as I've gotten older, where the moments you have in life and what you're doing with them and spending them, like, just going out and having a nice dinner with friends and families means worse, or means the most to me now. I heard a quote one time that all you should really care about in life is that whenever you walk into a restaurant, you never have to worry about how much it's going to cost. Like, everything else in life is just bullshit. And I was like, that made so much sense to me at the time. I was like, that's right. It's like, who cares? I mean, like, again, I like nice cars and stuff too. But again, it's like those memories and reflections in my head are like what I'm going to remember the most, in the conversations and the laughs and the drinks and those. So yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
So maybe
although I have this related to that, Chris, my husband was like super cheap. He could never imagine like ordering an expensive bottle of wine off the menu. And I remember like saying to him at one point, similar to what you were just saying, like, babe, life is too short to drink shitty wine. Right? Like, so, if we want to order the $100 or $150 bottle, I'm going to do it.
Yeah. Well, and it comes down to, with a term, breaking bread with people. You bring strangers together, and I can't remember where I've heard this from, picking it up or podcast or something. But, when you broke bread with people, like, you were inviting strangers in your house. And obviously this was before modern times, I would think. But, but yeah, and like that was sharing that meal with these strangers or whatever, like meant had more traditional values, rather than just being scared to open up to people and talk about their lives and learn about what they've been through, their trials and tribulations and obstacles and all that. So yeah, and I'm not a big bread eater, but like, hey man, it's cool to say that now. Like, hey, come on, let's break some bread. But even though we just eat whatever, like steak mainly, but yeah, and like when you were talking about the storytelling part of it, that going back before radio and television and podcasts and all that, that's just kind of was that family's entertainment. Was that, oh, who can tell a good story tonight? Then you can go fact check them or whatever, but it's like, hey, it was still a good story, right? So yeah, good times like that. It's good times like that. But so I guess moving on though, I mean, what does your future look like for yourself? I mean, do you want to keep buying businesses? Do you want to keep, doing this public speaking? Do you want to keep moving up? I mean, like, do you have set goals for yourself or what? I mean, I know
I
you're also
do. I
writing more books and
pardon
all.
me.
I know you. I
Oh
said
yeah.
you're also an author too. So I mean, do you have more goals to keep doing? Just keep riding the bus till the wheels fall off, or what?
I I I didn't have the objective when I was young around what level or title or wanted to achieve. Actually, the goal I wanted to be from the time I was probably 10 or 11 years old. I wanted to be a lawyer, and I ended up taking a year off before what I thought was going to be law school, working at the bank because they promoted me, and then I never went to law school because I ended up loving the world of business and leadership, and so I didn't expect. I think I always knew I was pushing hard, but I didn't have this goal or objective. At some point, it developed like I wanted to make the top 40 under 40. And if you'll hear maybe a bit of an accent, I'm actually originally from Canada, but have lived and worked in the US for many years. And they stopped doing it for a period of time, that top 40 under 40, when I was 37 or 38 years old. And they didn't bring it back until I was 41 or 42. And so that's an X for me on one of the goals or objectives I had. I made COO at 24, president of a company at 35, CEO by 41. And so from a career perspective, I've achieved a lot.
Yeah.
I now lead a really large portfolio for Accenture, which is a massive, consulting and technology and outsourcing organization. But I would like to go back to be a C-suite executive on the client side and do that for a period of time. I often turn around businesses. And so I want to go and do that as the client, not just, consulting and then, passing off the plan and walking away. And so I will do that and then eventually lead what, is referred to as sort of a portfolio career, where sitting on multiple boards. I sit on some now, but the goal is to sit on multiple for-profit paid boards, doing public speaking, writing other books, and then choosing how I spend my time. But I'm only 46, so I've got a long runway. My husband says, I'm never going to retire. Probably true, but I'll just choose to do things that I enjoy doing. I spend a lot of time talking to people about doing what brings them joy, personally or professionally, and then learning to say no or outsource the things that doesn't bring them joy or value, quite frankly. So yes, I will write another book. I don't want public speaking to be 100% of what I do, because right now it is that spark of joy for me. And if it became a full-time thing for me, I think I would enjoy it a little less. So again, doing it, 20 or 30% of the time with these other things is my plan.
I like it. Yeah.
And I did have a plan to, as a mother, I wanted to raise really good humans. And so now that they're adults and I'm close to being an empty nester with my daughter who wants to go and live with her brother and go to college where he is, great. I'm sending them off into the world, and they are good humans, maybe not as driven as I am, but their definition of success, they will define themselves. My son says all he wants is just to get married, have some children, and have a dog and a house. And I do remind him that costs money. But if that's what he wants and that's success for him, and then I'm like, amazing.
Is it going to be a weird lifestyle change having an empty nest now? Or is it just going to be business as usual?
It is going to be weird for sure. I mean, it's brand new for me. My daughter just graduated high school, and she was planning on taking a gap year. And now she said, no, she's going to go back up to Canada where her brother is going. And so for me, it's going to be odd not to, have, a child at home for sure. That said, I've always been really fortunate that both my ex and my husband now have been super supportive of my career. So when I traveled, at one point or multiple times in my career, but I remember one point in particular, almost 100%, right? 220 something days in one business year, which is how many business days there are.
Yeah.
I'm fortunate to have and never had to put my career on hold to be able to do that. So it doesn't change that for me, but the ability to travel more, or do things and not need to worry about children at home, that's the part that changes.
It just hit me. I want to go back a little bit. And you were talking about, I think you said something about teaching your clients to say no and to move out what doesn't bring them joy in their lives. And I didn't realize this, and in my point of view, but that's a lot tougher for people than I used to initially think. And I guess because so many people want to be a people pleaser, right? But I never used to think that's actually an issue or a problem And I'm not saying it's like a full 100% problem or issue, but it can be to an extent. And I guess that's my point, that I just used to think like, oh, people are just nice, they're generally nice doing things for others, but I didn't know how much to an extent that it could go where they're almost putting themselves at, I don't know, an issue in their actually personal lives at the same time. So I guess that's like my next question or thought, that, do most of your clients, do you see that like 90%, 100% are all either have issues with saying no or just being a people pleaser?
I think it depends on certainly the individual and their personality style. It also depends on where they are in their career. It's easy for me as an executive to say, no, I'm not doing it, or to find members of my team to delegate to.
Sure.
When you're earlier in your career, you're the one who gets a lot of the stuff passed down to you. And so it's a challenge to say no. So it's learning to manage those expectations. And there's some confidence that needs to come with that for sure, and the ability to prioritize. And I think that's a combination of, as you said, not wanting to disappoint or to be the people pleaser. And so again, there's a lot that comes from the inside in terms of the confidence in your value and worth, and what you do contribute, and therefore your ability to say no to certain things. But I'm also a big proponent of, and sort of my saying is, where there's conviction, there's capacity. So when people will ask me and they say, well, how do you do it all? So I'm executive, I sit on boards, I work out 6 days a week. Nice. At one point, when my kids were younger, I, coached, and my daughter in particular, I coached her hockey team, and that was, I don't know, 15 or 20 hours a week, so doing the things that I have great conviction, you find a way to do that. And so I talk about the 9 to 5, and then there's the 5 to 9. And no one really works 9 to 5 necessarily. We know it, time bleeds, but really what I mean by that is choosing how you're spending your time. At one point, I never watched television because although I would make sure I was out of the office by 6 to come home and have dinner with my family, I got back online and worked after the kids were in bed. Yeah. And so, learning to say no, learning to outsource or delegate to other people is a skill, quite frankly, and it takes some practice. And with that is confidence in your abilities, and also the conviction and discipline to figure out how to fit it all in.
Yeah, that's one thing, is also the self-discipline and time management that, again, like I've been learning. I'm a single dad of 2 dogs. I don't have any kids or anything, but also I've been asked before, though, I recently ran a half marathon. I'm a CrossFit bro. I compete in that. I have a 9 to 5. Well, it's not quote unquote 9 to 5. And then I have this now, but I've been asked countless times, like, how do you, still do it all? And so we'll be able to, have social activities and, catch up with friends and not be afraid to, if I go out and do this, am I putting this on the back burner? Is that going to affect me or anything? But it's really, I don't want to say it's simple, but I've once heard a quote, great athletes are governed by routine. And I put myself into this routine, and it's tremendous for me. Just that, because I know that, okay, I'll be at the 9 to 5 from here to here. I have my training from here, from like 5 to 9, like you just said, that I could be doing X, Y, and Z. And that's really what it just boils down to me. And I might be making it more simpler than what it is. And I'm sure there's people screaming at their phones or whatever they're listening to this on right now. It's not that easy, but I think it can be that easy. And, and you're a good point too, with actually, having a family and all the stuff that you're doing, sitting on boards and running businesses and all that good stuff, that it's just a matter of, do you really want to do it or not? And and like you said, sacrificing TV, well, some of the things you have to do, right?
Right.
Yeah, nobody wants to do that, but you do the things you don't want to do, so they help you in the following days. So, yeah, Mike Tyson used to say that too, or something along that. One of those stupid quotes like that. But yeah, it's and I used to think that having routines and being set to a schedule and having a calendar, almost it was very, you were geeky and nerdy, that it's just like, oh, that's not cool, like fly by the seam of your pants. But there's a lot of power into it, and yeah, and I guess that's my whole point, is that, hey, if you really want to be set to do something and whatever, with everyone's got shit to do all the time. So if you really want to do it, you'll find time for it, right?
Exactly. So for me, for working out, I used to find, I would get up at 5 or 5:30 in the morning to get to the gym first thing, be able to shower, be ready, and then get to the office. And so for me, that meant I had to go to bed at like 9:30, 10 o'clock. be getting up at 5. And, as my kids got older, I mean, they would laugh at me because they had a later bedtime than I did. But that's what was, my workout time is first thing in the morning, so, the discipline around what that looks like. And then also making time I'm a very big proponent of you're building your personal brand and your network. And we talked about breaking bread. And so making time I don't know if you've heard of the book, written by Keith Ferrazzi, called Never Eat Alone. And my husband jokes that it's always eat alone for him, because pre-pandemic, I would block out my calendar for lunch, whether that was with clients or suppliers or, prospective clients, or just friends, and staying really connected to my network. And so again, that comes with discipline in terms of making sure that that's blocked in, in the calendar, and having routine. And I remember I'm, in my mid 40s. So, being older than you, that carrying around one of those like ring binders before everything was in the phone. Right. Yeah. So that was geeky. So I'm glad it's all in my hand now.
For sure. It makes things easier. Do you find that, sticking to that morning routine of you working out and stuff, that kind of helps set your day, that, oh, I got my workout accomplished, I'm showered, I'm ready to go, I'm ready to take on everything that comes to me? Like that kind of sets you up for success right there?
Yeah, no, for me, it gives me energy for the day. It's also like, it's my, I'll say quiet time, although actually I'm an avid people watcher. So I don't like working out at home. I go to a physical gym, I'm watching everything, but I have my headphones on. And so I'll start with usually the daily podcast, kind of get current news or whatever, whatever news headlines. And then I either move to music, or sometimes it's an audiobook, but that's my time, me time. Charge and gain energy and get ready for the day.
Yeah. I love that, because like as I said, when I was running for that half marathon, or training for that half marathon, I would bounce around between, podcasts, music, or audiobooks. And again, it was just like you were there by yourself, and you were just in your moment, and you were just taking in whatever you were listening to, and just, hey, like, I don't want to say me time, but it's generally what it was. I never thought about it like that, but it just, yeah, when I was running, whether it be in the mornings or during my lunch break, it was like, oh, okay, now I'm ready to do the rest of my day. Even if I'd already started like half my day at work and then go down my lunch break, the second half made it even much more better, just because of those reasons right there. And just even the learning something new, or just thinking and having your own thoughts. Like, I remember just pausing the podcast or whatever, the book, a couple of times, based on whatever they said, and just like kind of taking that in. It's like, let me think about this a little bit. It's like, oh, okay, now let me look at it in their point of view. That makes sense now. So little wins like that for me. So anyway, but Victoria, I want to be respectful of your time. I know that we're closing in on that. So if people want to find you, or anything you want to plug, or all that good stuff, feel free to do that.
Sure. So you can Google me. It's a little scary now when I interview someone and they know a lot about me. If you do, I'm probably most of the first 10 pages. Nice. But the best way to learn about me, see articles, I will put links to podcasts I'm on, or media that I've been is on my website, which is just Victoria-Pelletier.com. Or for those in business, you can connect with me on LinkedIn directly.
Cool. Well, thanks for being here. Thanks for chatting with me and all that good stuff. And it was fun. I enjoyed it.
Thanks, Chris. It was a pleasure.
All right. See you.